gratitude. So if you would like, you can also put your hands together and we'll offer our gratitude. Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Yontah Pravesha Mama Vachamimam Prashuptam Sanjivayatya Kila Shakti Dharasvadhamna Anyamscha Hasta Charana Shravana Tvagadim Pranannamo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam. Thank you again. Hari Priya, thank you for joining us in the Heartspace, all the way from Connecticut. So, I'm so happy to be here with my roommate at the Gitanagari Farm Retreat. Owen, I didn't recognize him at first. So we are finishing our final discussion on exploring the 9 islands of the heart. Just a very quick recap. We're discussing the 9 islands of the heart because the spiritual world or the spiritual realm, it is explained in the ancient yoga texts that the spiritual world is like a lotus flower. And it opens and closes, you see? This is the hand gesture of a lotus flower. You can try this. So, this lotus flower opens and closes. And it is explained that Krishna, who is the embodiment of this transcendental, pure, unconditional, eternal spiritual love, when he wants to go from one place to another, when the divine wants to move from one place to another, all that happens is the lotus closes and the divine takes one step and the lotus opens up. This is how the divinity moves in the space of this divine realm of Goloka. And it's shaped like a 9-petal lotus. So 8 petals all around and the core. So this we've been discussing because we are also understanding that within this physical body, there is a heart. And within that heart lies a spiritual world. And within that spiritual world, there is this divine spiritual being, Paramatma, is situated. And that divine spiritual being is waiting for this heart to open. And so this process of understanding the 9 islands of the heart is try to see how to open this beautiful 9-petal lotus of our heart. What that means is that we live from the space of this transcendental 9 transcendental exchanges and interactions with the world, and thereby opening up this lotus flower so that the divine can come out and be seen and experienced by the world. I know this sounds very metaphorical because that's how the spiritual texts are written. So let's make it a little bit more practical. So what the wisdom texts are saying is that all our divine qualities are hidden deeply within ourselves. And we are by nature divine. Everything about us is divine. And the only thing that's impeding that divine experience in our love, in our lives, is simply that we have to operate from this space called the heart space. And that's why we uncovered this, discussed this 9 petals, or the 9 islands of the heart. And once we learn the 9 islands and how to operate from those spaces, such as we discussed Shravanam. Shravanam is divine hearing. How to enable the sound vibrations to go into the heart, and how to communicate from the heart. Shravanam. Kirtanam means to communicate from the heart. Shravanam means to hear from the heart. You'll be surprised to know, when we communicate with one another, we generally keep it on a very mental, superficial level. I have said this many times. When I first came to America, someone asked me, "How are you?" And by the time I could respond to them how I was, they turned around and they were gone. And then I was wondering why they were asking me, "How are you?" if they were not interested in knowing how I was. And then I came to understand it is a cultural thing. So these communications have become very cultural, and it doesn't go very deep. So this practice of bhakti means how to communicate from the heart, because that is where authenticity lays. Authenticity is within the heart. So when we hear from the heart and when we speak from the heart, so Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, remembering. How do we remember from the heart? The remembrance of the beautiful qualities that each and every heart carries in this world. You'd be surprised to know how beautiful that is. And that is the space of gratitude. If every single day we take time to remember all the incredible gifts that everyone has brought into our lives, and how the divine has a very divine hand within those hands, then we can live from the space of gratitude. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. Padasevanam means to render service from the heart. All exchanges in this world, we are all transactional beings. We're always, some transaction is going on. So how to have divine transactions, how to have transactions from the heart, how to serve from the heart. So, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, we just covered, and Archanam, how to worship from the heart. We idolize so many things in this world. But yet, when it comes to worshiping the deities in the temple or bowing down and showing respects, then we have a different standard. When we go to the church, we have a different standard. When we go to a Krishna temple, we have a different standard. Yet, it is completely fine to idolize everything in this world. So to understand that it is normal and a spiritual function of the soul to idolize. And the best way to idolize is to idolize the divine. So this is called Archanam. Vandanam is offering prayers from the heart. Prayers that come from deep within the heart will not only touch the heart of the divine, but will touch the heart of every living being on the planet. I have been spending a lot of time studying the teachings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He's a great saint that lived less than 500 years ago. And he writes such deep prayers to the divine that when you read those prayers, you will start feeling your heart opening up simply by reading his prayers. So this is called Vandanam. And Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam. Dasyam is the 8th island. Dasyam is understanding the nature of the heart as in the mood of a servitude, in the mood of service. Everyone in this world are going to be engaged in serving someone. Whether we like it or not, we're going to serve someone. If we don't serve someone, we'll end up serving our own minds and our own senses. So to understand that dasyam, that servitorship should be directed towards the divine. And when you are able to see divine in all beings, then you will also naturally serve all beings as divine children of God. So that is dasyam. And then we discuss sakyam. Sakyam means friendship. How divine friendships work. We have so many kinds of friendships in this world. We have drinking buddies, we have hiking buddies, we have cycling buddies, we have, gym buddies. We have all kinds of buddies, all kinds of friendships. But how to understand the importance of having spiritual friendships. And that friendship, spiritual friendship, can be with the creation of God, with the creation of the divine, and divine itself. How to have divine friendship with the divine. So therefore, we discovered the island of divine friendship. And last week and this week, we're covering our final island of the heart, which is called Atma Nivedanam. Atma Nivedanam is complete self-surrender. So how to understand this principle of self-surrender? Very beautiful, beautiful topic. Last week we defined what is surrender, and there are 6 limbs of surrender. We didn't get into the details of 6 limbs of surrender, but the 6 limbs of surrender is complete surrender of the body, mind, and words. And we gave an example of surrender as in giving selfless service to others. So Sharanagati, which is the Sanskrit word for complete surrender, is to do everything selflessly, knowing very well that the divine is there to protect you, and the divine is your provider, and the divine is there in front, in the center, and behind you. So this is called Sharanagati, that complete self-surrender. And Atma Nivedanam goes a little bit further. We discussed that Sharanagati means selfless service. And Atma Nivedanam means self-forgetful service. Please understand there is a difference between selfless service and self-forgetful service. I'm sure that many of you have heard this term, that if you want to find yourself, get lost in service, and there you shall find yourself. I'm not sure where that quote came from, but I have heard it from some of you students. So this forgetfulness of the self when doing service is considered Atma Nivedanam. So we see in the ancient wisdom texts, the residents of Vrindavan, they have this unique mood of service that they get so absorbed in the service, they forget who they are. Because that forgetfulness service is so relishable. The object of that service, who they worship as Krishna, who's the embodiment of transcendental, pure, unconditional, eternal spiritual love. When they're engaged in serving, then they forget themselves. And in that forgetfulness, that happens because a stage of bhakti is not just giving. That stage of bhakti is giving, giving, and giving, and non-stop giving. You are always giving. Because in that stage of bhakti, when the more you give, you start to realize the more you get. And in that experience of spiritual ecstasy is derived from that absolute space of surrender to the forgetfulness of oneself during service. There is that spiritual ecstasy that you experience. And that is why service, that stage of consciousness, is when you're giving and you never stop giving. And in that giving, you're experiencing the spiritual ecstasy, so you give more. And then you have more ecstasy, so you just keep giving and giving and giving, because you want to remain on that level of spiritual ecstasy. And the divine never stops taking. The divine continuously takes. The more you give, the more he takes, and the more you give, the more he takes, and he keeps giving. So this is the reciprocal relationship of someone in the stage of Atma Nivedanam, who is constantly giving, and the divine is constantly receiving and giving. So this cycle of love, of this transcendental flow of eternal spiritual love is going on. I'll give you a simple story. I mentioned this story in our previous calls. The story is of this great king Bali Maharaj. This is there in the ancient wisdom text called the Srimad Bhagavad Puran. There, he was such a powerful king that the demigods in the heavenly regions who are in charge of rain and the treasury of the entire universe, they were all subservient to him and were subdued by his powers. And one day, this young mendicant, this young sage, who was a dwarf, he came holding a little umbrella with his wooden peg shoes into the court of the king, and he begged the king, because the kings were known to give charity. For whatever you ask, they would give it to you. So he simply begged for 3 steps. He says, please give me enough earth, just enough space for me so that I can put 3 steps. That's all I need. Normally we ask for 100 acres of land, 200 acres, 50 acres. Everyone has requirement of how much space they need. And all he wanted was 3 steps. And the king immediately agreed. But his guru, his teacher, knew very well, just by looking at this dwarf Brahmana, this dwarf sage, that this dwarf was not an ordinary person. This dwarf had this radiance, this aura about him that seemed a little too simple for the eyes. And he realized that this dwarf is the divine incarnation himself, has come to beg alms from the king, because the king was known all over the world as the most charitable king. But the king immediately agreed, yes, I give you 3 steps. As soon as he agreed, then his guru had stopped him. He says, my dear disciple, I just want to let you know that you are making the biggest mistake of your life. I have guided you to be the most powerful king in the world. But now I'm telling you that if you promise this young boy, this young sage, 3 steps, he will take over everything and you will be left with nothing. You will be bereft of all opulences. Because this young sage is none other than the divine personified. And the king was so happy. He said, if I am so great that even the greatest being on the planet, in the greatest being ever existing, is coming to beg from me, I'm going to give him whatever he wants. So he offered the divine incarnation, and his name was Vamana. Vamana means dwarf. So he offered him 3 steps. So with 1 step, he covered the entire upper planetary systems. Another step, he covered the lower planetary systems. So he says, oh dear king, I have taken my steps, but I still have 1 more step left. And he says, well, can you please place that step on my head? That's the only place that's left. In yoga traditions, when a teacher places their feet on the head of the student, that means they're blessed. It is not a physical thing, it's a spiritual exchange that happens. That means it's a symptom of complete surrender. Atma Nivedanam. That is why we're discussing this king, because he had complete soul surrender, gave his everything, his possessions, his kingdom, his families, everything, including his own physical body. And the sage lays his divine step foot on his head and gives him a place, a planet itself, more opulent than the planets of the demigods in the heavens. And not only did he give him that, he said, I will personally be the security guard at the gates of that planet. So much so, because he was so attracted by the divine surrender of this king, that he decided to be the security guard of this entire planet. And this planet had 4 entrances. So one day, the divine consort, the divine has the masculine and the feminine. So feminine divinity is Lakshmi Devi, and the masculine is Vishnu. So she approached King Bali in his own planet. He says, my dear king, my husband who is protecting is as the security at your gates, he doesn't know which gate you're going to come out of at what time in the day. Can you please at least let us know in advance which gate you'll come out to? Because the divine has to make an effort to be there before you come, to make sure he's there to help you go in and out of the gates. So this is what happens, my dear friends, that the divine will personally come and be your security guard. The divine will come to protect you from beginning, middle, and end when we practice this Atma Nivedan. And this is how the divine exchange works. When we operate from that space of Atma Nivedanam, then we are in that space of continuous spiritual reciprocation with the divine. And this is why in Bhakti, we're practicing this divine exploration of spiritual relationships. That spiritual relationships that is ever expanding with deeper and deeper spiritual emotions. And it's something that we Bhakti yogis aspire for. Contrary to that, in our material life, we are noticing that more and more we have become dependent on others. In the material world, we're dependent on others. In the spiritual world, we're dependent on that divine, this divine exchange. In the material world, when we farm, when we plant seeds in the ground, we're depending on science to bring water from somewhere so we can sprinkle our garden. I'm doing garden here in Atlanta. And so we have to bring water from human-made sources to plant, to water the plants. But there was a time the farmers used to just plant their crops and they would depend on the divine with complete surrender. And the divine would shower rains. And then they will be able to harvest. So our dependency on humans and machines has brought us further and further away from the dependency on the divine and the dependency on our divine spiritual nature. And this is why this is very important in our spiritual practice, to recalibrate and understand, where have we come? Who are we? Where do we come from? And how to come back to the source. So I'm going to request all of you to kindly please give up suffering. It's a very simple ask. Because the minute you give up suffering and your intoxication with suffering, then you'll naturally be able to gravitate towards the stage of operating from these 9 islands of this divine heart. We are so addicted to suffering, my dear friends. So addicted to suffering. So much so, we get bored when we're not suffering. We have to figure out how to get into something to create some chaos so we can increase our suffering. It is not something that we do consciously because we do not live life consciously. We live life unconsciously. And we unconsciously cause ourselves to remain in a state of suffering. And so therefore, Atma Nivedana means consciously living with the supreme consciousness. So, thank you all so much. This is going to be our last class on exploring the 9 islands of the heart. And next Saturday, we will have different themes that we will be covering in relation to the divine heart. So thank you so much. Is there any reflections, comments, questions, any objections, any corrections?
Just want to say thank you, Prabhu, for the beautiful class. And like every week, you always thrill us with something inspiring daily, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for being there on this journey with me.
No.
Any comments, any questions, any reflections? Ramananda Prabhu.
Yes, okay, there is 9 islands of the heart. And the question is there, like, we cannot do things artificial. So from what point can we start, for example, coming to that Atman Nivedanam? Is there a build-up? Do we have to go through all the processes separately, Shravanam, Kirtanam, one by one? It's also said that you can achieve perfection by practicing one alone. So how to find a practical way to progress in this heart space?
Beautiful question. And I also see that you have answered the question as well. So what I would just add to your answer is that these 9 islands of the heart are so beautiful that you can be in any one of the 9 islands and be in spiritual ecstasy. And so there's no need to worry. But it is explained that this Atma Nivedanam is a very, very high level of spiritual relationship. And sometimes we can achieve this instantly. And sometimes it can take us many lifetimes. And that comes through 2 different methods. One is the method of sadhana bhakti, means daily regulated spiritual practice. When we practice every single day, these 9 islands of the heart, be in each island for a little bit, hear, sing the glories, remember the glories. I recommend everyone to read the Srimad Bhagavad Puran. It's just incredible, loving, transcendental narrations of divine pastimes. So you remember, just like a mother, when the child gets older, when she's alone without the child, she's thinking about all the beautiful qualities and the little things that the child has done. So the divine pastimes are available in the Srimad Bhagavad Puran. So in this way, every day we can practice 1 or all 9 islands of bhakti. That is up to an individual. And that should be a daily practice. So that is step 1 that is recommended. And step 2 is that when you do step 1, then there can be something called Kripa Siddhi. There is sadhana siddhi, that you become enlightened through the practice of sadhana, that you achieve living in the 9 islands of the heart simply by your determination every single day, regulated practice. And the second is, when you do the regulated practice, then you also become the recipient of something called Kripa Siddhi. It's called Kripa means mercy.
Mercy.
Undeserving mercy for no reason. Someone comes up and tells you, Ramananda Prabhu, here is $1 million. And then you can faint.
Thank you.
So in spiritual life, someone can come and say, Hari Priya, I'm going to be here to guide you on your spiritual path every single day for the rest of your life. You have never searched in the whole world, and it just happens to you. That is called Kripa Siddhi. And most of us, you will notice, are recipients of that. And the more we do sadhana, the more we get Kripa. Just Kripa means blessings, unsolicited, just because. You will notice in spiritual life, we are so eager to find gurus, find this, find that. In spiritual life, you don't have to find anything. In spiritual life, you just have to be. You just have to practice. And being in that spiritual practice is sufficient. That's all we need. Because from that being comes the divine being. Unless you were in the being, then the divine being are not able to communicate with us. Because there's too many coverings, too many layers. So therefore, being in sadhana, being in the 9 islands of the heart is actually called being. And when you're in that stage of being, then the divine being is having this loving exchange with you, non-stop. Things will happen in your life that are completely unsolicited, that you never expected. So this divine intervention is called Kripa Siddhi. And that happens when we practiced sadhana. And I always urge everyone to please pick up a daily spiritual practice. Just as your body needs food, your mind needs nourishment, and your heart needs nourishment. And the heart is eagerly awaiting for your attention. So every day, minimum 1 hour, up to 2 hours should be dedicated to connect the individual heart to the divine heart. Does that make any sense, Ramananda Prabhu?
Beautiful, Prabhu. Thank you so much. I have another question.
Narayani has a question. Can we check
Okay.
with her? Yes.
Hare Krishna. I have a question about finding balance, because I can get so addicted to being hooked up to the divine that, like, I forget to pay my taxes. I forget to go to the doctor. I forget to go get my eyes checked. I forget about the mundane material things that I'm supposed to do to keep up this material life, because I'm in ecstasy, serving, and it's hard to find the balance between the two. Can you speak on that?
Yes, beautiful question, Narayani Devi. So the balance is, disbalance is caused when you forget that you're also part and parcel of the divine. And that means being part of the divine, you have a functional responsibility to yourself. So if you're only serving others because you see the divinity in them, but there is something that is missing because you're missing yourself. So abruptly jumping to forgetting yourself in service to others might deplete you. And so therefore, always keeping in mind that the functional aspect of our existence, it is a fundamental responsibility of divine, of a person who's operating from the divine space. So that means you have to give yourself time. That means your functional, your doctor's visits, your laundry, eating, sleeping, those are important needs that this body has, because your body is simply a beautiful temple of the divine. And so if your body is a beautiful temple of the divine, then how can you neglect that? So that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of my favorite saints, he sings very beautifully, Mama Mana Mandire, please come to the temple of my mind and please dance, O Krishna, O Govinda. Because if our mind is the temple room of the divine, where the divine can come and dance, how beautiful is that? So that means we have to keep the temple room clean and tidy and neat and well taken care of. If a heart is filled with broken furnitures, if a heart is filled with dirty laundry, if the heart is filled with debris everywhere, there won't be any space for the divine to come and dance. And that's why it is very important. Sadhana bhakti has a very important characteristic. That means taking care of the body, mind, and the spirit. We have to address the functional needs of the body and the mind and our things that we have to do in the world. Just like when someone comes to your house for kirtan, you have to move the furnitures around, sweep and mop, and make sure there is a beautiful place for everyone to come and chant and dance and enjoy your beautiful cooking. You have to make some space for it. Similarly, your body is a temple of God, is a temple of the divine, and your mind is a beautiful dance floor. So you have to clear out your mind by clearing out, the functional needs of the body. And this is recommended by our sages. They really emphasize you should not neglect. Does that make any sense, Narayani Devi?
Yes, thank you. It's hard to find balance between spiritual and material for me.
Yes, that is why we are here, to work on finding balance. And that's the beauty of life. Otherwise, what are we doing if we cannot find that spiritual balance? That's what yoga is. We have to consciously do yoga at all times in our lives. Thank you for your beautiful question. Any other reflections? Owen, what would you like to share? I'd like to hear your wisdom. I haven't heard from you in a long time.
Well, I appreciate the emphasis on daily practice and, the diversity of the 9 islands. Don't stick to just one thing. You have to broaden your practice, is what I'm hearing.
Nice. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Any other reflections? Ramananda Prabhu.
Sorry, I have another question, because you brought up that word cultural. You're saying you came to America and they were asking how you're doing. And you discovered this, you said it's just a cultural thing. So that concept of culture is used. It's kind of I'm surprised that you're using it in that I didn't hear it in that context before, because like we heard like Krishna consciousness is a cultural revolution, and Mao Zedong spoke also about cultural revolution, but 200 million people were dead. So this word culture, how do we use it? What is it? What does it mean? What is culture nowadays in the context we are living? To me, it's confusing.
A very beautiful question. I am not a big cultural revolution person. I am into the heart revolution. And I feel the world needs a heart revolution, because so many different cultural revolutions are being attempted by so many different groups in the world. Everyone is having cultural wars. And it's good if it works for them. And what I see in the world is that there is a need for a heart revolution, that people or a bhakti revolution, that people are really, really operating from that space of love. And because we have gotten far away from that space of love, we have moved far away from the heart, we are having to deal with so many other revolutions. So the real revolution we need, that I understand, bhakti is the revolution of the heart. And I don't know if it's called a revolution. I think it's called evolution rather than revolution. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that word very much. So I would say that bhakti is the evolution. We need the evolution of the heart. We need to evolve more and more in the center, the core of our life. So, and that really means when the consciousness is there, we see spirit in everything. In matter included. And that is spiritual evolution or bhakti evolution. Because the material world, they're so good, they see matter even in the spirit. The material consciousness sees matter in the spirit. And the bhakti revolution is about seeing the spirit in matter. That consciousness is what really, really is what is needed in this world. And that is why we call it the bhakti evolution. And whoever wants to do revolution, please let them go for it. Let them have party.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Brenda, how can we serve you?
I just wanted to say thank you for the wonderful class. I was just reading in Bhagavatam just last night the story about about Bali Maharaj and how he surrendered. And Vamandev put his foot on his head. That was his final offering because there was nothing else left. And in that surrender, he, like you mentioned earlier, there's a difference between selflessness and forgetful selflessness. But when he
Self-forgetfulness, selfless service and self-forgetful service.
Self-forgetful service, right? It was my first time hearing that. But in his actions, he absolutely surrendered everything. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't holding back at all. He completely surrendered everything, even to the point to where, he was willing to offend his own spiritual master. And I was really touched by that. And it was just nice to have you kind of go back over that again today. But one of the things that absolutely sticks out is the fact that I don't know, it's like when we think about surrender, it's like, we're giving up everything, but that's in a material sense. But when we surrender in a spiritual sense, we absolutely gain everything that we can probably not even imagine, And I just wanted to say that about the class and just to comment on evolution and revolution. Of course, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but when you put the re in front of it, it just means that it's continuing. So when it's revolution, it's just continuing to evolve. It's just, something that's an ongoing process. And as far as the word culture, to my understanding, that's, well, the way that you were using it, I understood that you were saying like, it's just the way that people here in this nation
Some people,
have,
not all.
yes, some people. It's like a way of thinking, a way of, practice that's being done. And so, like, I guess you can apply the word culture to, the way that people are doing things as a whole, or something that they're constantly practicing, whether, you know, you want to look at it as a tradition, but actually it's uncultured, because when I think of culture, you're thinking of something that's going to actually help evolve you or keep you revolving, you know? And so this particular word culture, I can understand how he got confused with that. But yeah, I hope I was able to add something to it. All right, Krishna.
Thank you, Brenda. Any other reflections?
I do have one, Vedaji.
Yes.
So the act of service and the act to surrender in practical world, how do we choose? And I'm not finding better words to say this, but there are so many people who need help, and even if we want to, it becomes to a point where it starts draining away your energy. So how do you decide where to give your service and where not to give your service?
Service that energizes you is where you need to give service. I give you a simple example. If you come to our Food for Lives kitchen, we're serving the unhoused people in Atlanta 7 days a week, 365. We don't miss a single day of service to them. And anyone who walks into that kitchen door is charged. And once they come start doing service, they come again and they just keep serving. So there's something about spiritual service when we do service without having any expectation, and that environment itself is spiritually nourishing and charging you. Service helps to keep you energized, not deplete your energy. Depletion means someone is just taking, and not giving anything back, or there's something wrong with the consciousness.
Yep. True.
So that has to be checked. And that's why I recommend whenever you do service, we have to do service in the mode of goodness, not service in the mode of passion or ignorance. So many people need so many things. All the alcoholics, the alcoholics who are homeless, unhoused in the city of Atlanta, they want money. Now you can give them money and you can feel good, but what they're going to do with their money is to go and get more drunk. So that charity is in the mode of ignorance. And if you keep giving money, you will never end. You'll just keep giving money, and then you'll realize you don't have enough money to give, and you'll feel de-energized. You'll feel depleted. Oh my God, I'm working so hard giving all these people my money, and there's nothing changing in their lives. They're just taking the money and drowning themselves with more stimulants. So therefore, it's very important to understand there's service in the mode of goodness, service in the mode of passion, and there's service in the mode of ignorance. And there is also service in the mode of pure goodness. So those are important aspects to consider. And so therefore, I always recommend people to do service that energizes you. And that is service in the mode of goodness. Like in Connecticut, we have Haripriya. She's a therapist. Whoever she meets, she brings them to Food for Lives. She is like this this magnet, She's like the Seva magnet for Connecticut. Whoever she sees, every client she has, whatever gathering she goes to, she's like, you got to come to Food for Lives. You got to come to Food for Lives. You're going to love it. And as a result, we see every weekend, there's so much dialogue going on in the group. and everyone is cooking different things and just really putting their heart into the service. So that's something that I've noticed, that Seva energizes people like Haripriya. So Geet, thank you for your beautiful question. It is now beyond a little bit over our time, and I don't want to hold you up any longer. Thank you all so much. My humble appeal to all of you is please, please, please give your heart some attention and some time every single day. And we are here in the Heartspace every single day, every single weekend on Saturday at 9 a.m. Please feel free to invite anyone and everyone that you know and that you don't know, so that we can together grow in our heart space and from our heart space. Thank you all very much. Namaste, everyone.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Prabhu.
Probably want to go.